Hi, welcome to the Student Learning Commons at Simon Fraser University. And this is your academic writing refresher. This is brought to you by the Student Learning Commons. Just before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that this video recording is being made on the unceded and rightfully owned territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And I want you to take a moment wherever you're sitting and viewing this to consider the lands that you're on and the people who stewarded them for millennia so that you could be here today enjoying this learning space. Today, we are going to be dusting off some of the writing skills that you might be a bit nervous that you haven't used for a while. So we're going to be covering things like managing your time and focusing while writing, creating sound arguments from sources, and organizing and revising drafts, and also finding more help when you need it. And we're happy to help you out with that. So let's take a moment to talk about managing time and focusing during the writing process. The first thing you want to do is think about where you are going to start off with your assignment. Is there a model or a sample available that you can look at? Has your instructor provided something that gives you an idea of the kinds of things they like your assignment to look like? And are there other things that you want to take into consideration? Like, what do you look for as a reader? What do you pay attention to in your assignment guidelines? So have a look. If you can't see this image on your device, it is showing a circle, a large circle that says your assignment, and then around the edge of that circle are smaller circles with the things that we want to think about when we're approaching our assignment. What is the due date? What is the format? How long should it be? What style should I be using in my writing? Who is my audience? What's my purpose? What citation style does my instructor want me to use? We also encourage you to make use of the assignment calculator. There are many different kinds of these online, and there's one available through the Student Learning Commons website. And as you're using this, do remember that it's meant for the average student. And most of us are not average students. So also take your own learning and writing style into consideration and adapt the calculator's results for that. For example, the calculator might tell me that I'm going to be writing maybe 3 or 4 or 5 drafts, but I know that I'm a 7 to 11 draft person. So I'll obviously be increasing the time it will take me to produce that number of drafts and revise them. So also take those things into consideration for yourself. To avoid the crunch and the stress of last-minute writing, get support as you go. So ask others to read the draft and ask them if it makes sense. Is there structure? Is there flow? What's the style like? How does it sound to them? You can also book a Learning Commons consultation well before the paper is due. And sometimes students will book these even before they've started writing, and they kind of use them as time measures. By my first meeting at the Student Learning Commons, I'm going to have completed my introductory paragraph, and I'll have the topic sentences of my other paragraphs, or something like that. Or sometimes people just book a session with us to come and chat about a topic that they're going to embark on. We're also really happy to go over your assignment description with you to make sure that you understand what it is that you're being asked to do. And so typical verbs that can be used in these assignment sheets are things like describe, which means providing specific characteristics and features, or respond, which means your instructor is asking you to react to something, or summarize, which means that you're condensing the main points using as few words as possible. Maybe you're defining something or explaining. Maybe you're analyzing. And that's when you're being asked to discover some of the essential features or meaningful patterns in what it is that you're reading as you research. And maybe you'll be asked to evaluate something to determine the significance or worth of what it is that you've read. So Synthesizing is one of the more complicated things people are asked to do. It's not really complicated, but what it does involve is weaving together, examining and weaving together and evaluating some of the different sources of information that you're provided with. Make sure that you understand your assignment. If you don't, do reach out to your instructor or your TA, and don't hesitate to come and see us at the Student Learning Commons. We're happy to help you. So, how do you focus? A lot of us use visual techniques, and you can see that on the left-hand side, there's sort of a mind map where there might be some images. You might draw little pictures. You might do this on a piece of paper or on a Google slide, something digital, like a Jamboard, or you might even use, like I do, a space in my actual office. I will use a wall, and I will use Post-it notes and images, and I will tape them up and stick them up and add different pieces of information. So you can use an abstraction ladder, as in the right, where you're moving along different kinds of information and exploring them to try to focus your idea. Whichever method works for you, make sure that you're comfortable in the tool that you choose. So, imagine that you are asked to write an argumentative essay about social media and societal changes. The prompt asks you to explain the relationship between social media and how we produce, distribute, and consume information. And then it asks you to discuss the social implications. So if we were having a live in-class discussion, there would be a moment where you'd think about this, write down some notes, and turn to your neighbor. But since we're not doing that, why don't you take a moment to pause the video and try to take down some notes? What would you focus on? Which one or two concepts would you focus on? And what kind of mind map or abstraction ladder would you create as you made some notes and tried to organize your thoughts? Try doing that now. Okay, I will pretend that you paused the video and you took some notes and you're back joining me. Hopefully you came up with some ideas. It's very useful to sit down for an initial few minutes after you get an assignment topic to mind map some ideas just to get started. The longer I leave my assignments before I actually delve into thinking about them, the harder it is for me to focus on them later. So I like to try to get some ideas down initially, even if those ideas are not ideas that I use when I actually write my paper. So let's have a look at what it means to create sound arguments when you're using research sources. How do you use that research as you craft the arguments to persuade your readers? So the first thing you want to do is gather the ideas. And you're going to use your class notes, the notes you took during discussions. What strikes you? What intrigues you? What generates questions? And maybe as you were taking notes, you do something that I find really useful. Maybe you're reacting in the margins of those readings, whether it's your textbook, if you own it, or whether it's printed off notes that you were handed by your instructor. I often will write question marks. I have a question. Sometimes I'll even write Q and write my question right there. I also will write happy faces for ideas that I really agree with or I love, and angry faces for ideas that I don't love or I disagree with. All of those reactions help us to form our own ideas and to start digesting that information. Do consider your own lived experience. What do you already know about this topic? What do you bring to this topic? What have you observed? Can you see or touch anything involving this topic? Anything that you can enter into for this information or bring to this topic is really useful. And then, just as a starting point, not as actual research that you will cite in your paper, check out Wikipedia, Google, social media, the news. What is everybody saying about this topic? try to get a broad sense of the issues or get more background. Often, what we know about a topic is very one sided. And so it's important to find out what the other side or sides are. And these are just starting points for more formal research. Obviously, you're going to go elsewhere, but it's useful to start with some of these larger areas. And Wikipedia is perfectly useful as a starting point, but it should never end up in the references page of your paper. So, where can you go? Start with the university library search bar. What are you looking for? You can also be more specific. Are you looking for specific articles from some article databases? Do you know the name of a couple of publications where you want to hunt for these? Don't be afraid to ask your instructor or your TA for some publications that might be useful if you're feeling a bit lost. This is also a place where you can go, obviously, if you can see this on your device, to find citation and style guides. You can also book some group study rooms, and you can also book some books. You can reserve some books that might be on the reserve list that you can't actually remove from the library. You can also ask a librarian. So if you're at home during working hours, you can reach out and connect with a librarian to get more information to help you with your search. I find it really useful when I'm researching something to ask questions. And again, I use that space on my wall and I write my questions on Post-it notes and I put them up on the wall. I might not even answer these questions in my research, but they get me started and they're things that I'm curious about. Following our curiosity and then focusing that curiosity on the specific details of our topic can be really helpful in motivating us to do some research, look for some really interesting tidbits, and then to write our research and the results of what we're finding. So things that you can start with are, what is it? When did it start? And here you're dealing with your topic. How long has it been going on? How or where does it fit in? How does it work? How does it compare or contrast with others? How might it affect other elements or people? What might happen if? And I often don't just Google around as one of my starting points or check with Wikipedia. I also pick up the telephone. I really like to talk to people and ask them questions. What do they know about this thing? And that sometimes can get me excited, especially if a topic doesn't at first seem exciting to me. So do whatever it is that you need to do to get excited, and then enter into that research. So how do you read your research materials? So it's really important to get an overall look at the text that you're reading. And I often start with just looking through a paper. What are the headings? What are the subheadings? Are there graphs? Are there photographs? Do they have captions? How is the paper structured? And then I start reading. And this is really useful because in having that overview of my research material, I'm starting to prepare my brain for what it's about to receive. And that can be really important in removing fear and also in making me believe initially that I know a little bit already about that topic, so I don't feel as frightened of it, perhaps. And so the first thing you do when you read a text is get the gist, the overall meaning. What's the overall purpose of the text? What's the problem or the issue that it's presenting? And then start to think about, and this will happen the more you get into your readings when you've read 3 or 4 or 5 articles. How do these sources relate to your purpose for writing? So check back with that topic that you were given or the topic that you narrowed it into and figure out how this research fits in, or are there bits of this research that fit? And in your own words and without looking at the source, and this is hard for me, I have to put it on the other side of the room, write the gist, the overall meaning of the text's focus or thesis. And this will be a paraphrase. And you should try to get it down to 1 or 2, maybe 3 sentences. You're going to leave out a lot of information. So this is not about specifics. This is the gist, the overview. Knowing how to paraphrase effectively will help you solidify your understanding. Okay, if we don't understand an article, we can't use it as a source. So it's really important to get to a place where we understand what we've read and then what we're talking about when we talk about that source. And this will help you build effective arguments. If you wish, you can go on to the library's SLC site and check for a PDF of our handout, Techniques for Effective Paraphrasing. There are all kinds of resources to help you. And if you're not practiced at paraphrasing, don't hesitate to book an appointment with the Student Learning Commons. We're really happy to help you do that. Okay, developing your own thesis statement. So in an academic paper, a thesis statement takes a debatable position that you support or justify using scholarly or other reputable sources as evidence. Okay, a debatable position means that somebody could challenge you on this. And I think that that's a really risky thing to do. But if you take a position that's not debatable, that somebody could answer easily with yes or no, then you haven't really got an interesting paper. So it's worth taking the risk and being vulnerable by having a debatable position. Okay. And what you're going to do to make sure that you can be in a position that you're able to maintain is finding resources that help you back it up. And that's your evidence. A thesis statement also conveys a logical relationship between two or among three ideas, for example, cause and effect. And you can find all kinds of examples in some of our PDF sheets about what thesis statements are and what they aren't. So please feel free to browse the Student Learning Commons online library of PDF resources. Based on your notes and paraphrases, you'll draft a working thesis. And consider your working thesis to be a work in process until your very final draft. I was really interested to learn about myself as I worked on my writing process, that I do not refine my final thesis is refined as my very last thing. So the very last thing that I will work on and polish is my thesis statement. And until that point, it is working because it's in evolution. It's working with me and my ideas as they evolve. So, are any of these thesis statements? Let's have a look. I'm going to read them out loud and you can guess ahead, and then we'll go through them. Social media users are often very aware of who is in their network and what their attitudes are. Social media has greatly impacted how we receive information today. Social media users don't always feel they can express themselves freely. So you might have some opinions about these thesis statements, and you might have decided that perhaps they're not specific enough. Well, let's look at one that is a bit more specific. Have a look at this working thesis. Because social media users are especially aware of the opinions of those around them, social media networks tend to influence what users say rather than reflect what users believe. And this is adapted loosely from www.pewinternet.org. And so you can use all kinds of sources, and you can look at what are the thesis statements in some of the articles that you're reading or some of the pieces that you're finding online or offline. Notice that this working thesis gets down to the nitty-gritty, and it's bringing up a lot of ideas that would have to be unpacked in the course of writing your paper. This might be a thesis that you start with, a working thesis that you update as your ideas evolve. You might make it even more specific, or you might switch out some of your phrases for different ones. And then at the very end, you would revise it so that it fully reflected what you had shared with your reader in the rest of your paper. So here are some burning questions that we often get from students. How much source material should I include in my paper? When should I use direct quotes, and when should I paraphrase? And when paraphrasing, how do I avoid using too much of the wording, of the source's wording? And when does that become plagiarism? So you can learn more about this from the Student Learning Commons worksheet, Working with Sources in Academic Writing. And there we will take you through a variety of answers. But pretty much source material needs to support your arguments. So if you read your final draft and you haven't really supported some claims that you made, either you need new evidence or you need to alter your claims. Direct quotes, we're going to take you through that in a bit, but largely we say that you should not use more than, some people would say 15% of your paper as quoted material. I would say more like 10% or less. Some professors don't even allow quoting because they much prefer paraphrasing. And we're going to take you through what paraphrasing is, but honestly, do check out the source from the Student Learning Commons, Working with Sources in Academic Writing, to help have more confidence that you will be able to avoid plagiarizing and avoid this really sneaky form of plagiarizing that a lot of us accidentally do when we use patch writing. So, how to organize and revise your drafts. Use your thesis to develop your paper. A good thesis statement is like a roadmap. It helps your reader anticipate what lies ahead. So, the main points in your thesis should be forecasting the structure of your paper. A professor once said to me, "Hey, this is not a mystery story. You need to tell your reader what they're going to find out." And I've always kept that idea with me when I'm proofreading my work to make sure that my thesis statement actually does its job. Did I tell my reader what they were going to find out? Did I forecast the structure of my paper? So, from thesis to outline. So, a point form outline is fine to get your overall structure, or what we might look at as the skeleton of your paper. But a full sentence outline is going to help you plan your paragraphs and keep you focused. And using that full sentence outline might even get you some working topic sentences. And those are the first sentences in each paragraph. So really do consider, like, start with a point form outline, but then move to a full sentence outline so that you can start to get some of those sentences down on your page. They're always alterable, so don't be afraid to do that bit of writing and sort of crack open your topic. Be courageous. You can always find more information at Purdue's online writing lab. They have a lot of information about many of the elements that we cover in this presentation. They're kind of my go-to site. So how do you integrate sources? You've done this research, you've read all these papers. What should you do now? So you can summarize, and this is always a good idea. Why should you summarize? To condense the main ideas of a source. If you summarize, always cite your source. And that means that you're always referencing the lead author, at least the lead author, if there are several authors, and the year of publication. And this is just being honest. I think of it as honoring all these other authors who have contributed to my paper. And so when I think about it, it doesn't even have anything to do with plagiarizing. It has to do with honoring all of these other writers and all of their thoughts that have gone into my paper. And I find that a much easier way to think about things. If I think about honoring people, I think about including them. When should you quote? As I said, infrequently. 15% of the content of your whole paper or less should be quotations. Again, I would recommend 10% or less, and make sure you check with your instructor because some do not allow quotations and they prefer paraphrasing only. Why would you quote though? Well, sometimes it is important to quote, like when the exact words or the certain phrasing that an author uses, you just want to quote this one phrase because it's very odd or very specific. So then you would use a quote. Do you use a citation? Absolutely. And again, that's honoring the person whose words you used in a quote, and you show that it's a quote by placing quotation marks around the exact wording of the original author. So paraphrasing, how much should you paraphrase from your sources? Paraphrasing will be most of your paper. You're going to be explaining what these other writers said, and you're paraphrasing their thoughts so that your readers will understand and also understand that you understand the material. And it helps offer context, and it helps you synthesize these ideas from a bunch of different authors that you read as you were researching this topic. And again, you're going to cite this. And again, I always think of it as respecting the people who offered me their ideas. And so, of course, I'm going to include their names and the date of publication of their papers. So, when possible, integrate your sources using reporting verbs. And these are verbs that indicate how the writers were talking about their work. So you can use verbs like claim, explain. It's better to stay away from talky verbs that don't really tell your reader very much, like so-and-so stated or so-and-so says. That doesn't really tell your reader how the author thinks about the information. Are they encouraging something? Are they advocating? Are they disagreeing with something? Choosing a stronger verb really helps get information across to your reader about how your sources thought about that information. And that's very useful. Attributional terms clearly credit the source, and so you can actually use the authors in your sentences. So according to so-and-so, or so-and-so describes such and such, or explains that such and such. Make sure that you're attributing how the original authors are thinking about the information in the context of your paper. Revising your draft. Go through a first sweep. Look for common paragraph problems, okay? And I would take a paragraph at a time and look specifically at each paragraph. What do you do if there's no overall governing topic? You've got everything in there but the kitchen sink. That's a problem. Maybe that's not a paragraph. Maybe that information needs to be divided up and put into separate paragraphs. So there's a problem if you don't have a clear topic sentence. And remember that that first sentence in a paragraph, that topic sentence, does the same thing for your paragraph that your thesis statement does for your whole paper. Your topic sentence is going to be a roadmap for your reader. It's going to show exactly where you're going to take them in the paragraph. You have a problem if there's a lack of structural cohesion or flow, if information isn't logically organized, or if there's a sudden switch in topic. Sentences perhaps don't clearly connect to each other. And maybe you've used overly common transitions. Is there something that's more specific to what you're saying that you could use instead? And perhaps your final sentence is a bit abrupt, mechanical, or off topic. A really good final sentence is going to be a bridge between that paragraph and your next. So you can also take a look at some of the information we provide in our different handouts for more information on how to revise your paragraphs. In this paragraph, see if you can spot at least 3 problems. I'm going to read it out loud. Be looking with a critical eye. What doesn't work for you as a reader? Physical activity is good for people. It contributes greatly to a person's physical and mental well-being. The schedules of varsity teams are very demanding. The swim team has 11 practices a week, of which 8 are mandatory. The workouts, consisting of approximately 4,000 meters each and also including running, weight training, and flexibility exercises, keeps a person in good physical shape and also increases mental awareness. You are active before classes begin, so you are alert and awake. Not only should students be physically active, they should also choose healthy foods rather than junk. Okay, so I bet you found a number of problems in here, and a couple of these might be grammatical glitches. Others are that perhaps a topic sentence wasn't really a good guide. It offered a little bit of an idea of the area that the reader was going to head in this paragraph, but perhaps not a really specific roadmap. And so there are some things that you've already been thinking about that you would do to this paragraph to fix it. And you might even remove some information that doesn't seem to fit with the overall idea. As you're looking at your own paragraphs in your own writing, be thinking again with this critical eye and see what you can do to strengthen that paragraph. And a lot of that begins with your topic sentence. So as you revise your draft, you're going to go through a second time. Start to drill down into the sentence level. You've already looked at the overall organization of your paper. You've looked at each paragraph, how the paragraphs fit together, if they're well organized and logical for your reader. But now you're looking at your sentences. Are they grammatically correct? If you have specific problems with certain grammar elements and you want to have them fixed easily, come and visit us at the Student Learning Commons for a writing appointment, and we're happy to help you with that. There are also lots of online resources that we offer for very common grammatical mistakes in university level writing. You can also check out Purdue's online writing lab. There are many sources that you can find on the internet to help you with different grammatical elements. Also look for what's the key message in the sentence. Are your subject and your verb easy to spot? And are they close together? This is one of the problems that we find. The further a subject is from a verb, the easier it is for a reader to lose track of what the sentence was going to say. And whenever a reader has to go back and reread a sentence, that disrupts the flow. So that's a problem for you as a writer, because you want the flow to be continuous. You want reading to be easy and clear for your reader. Do your sentences tell a story? What's happening to whom or what? And are your sentences clear and concise? Again, we have we have worksheets that can help you with this. We also have advice for you if you want to come and visit us at the Student Learning Commons. And a pro tip is to try to reduce clutter between subjects and verbs and omit jargon and filler words. These just take up space and they take up your reader's time. Your reader wants to know what you have to say. They want to learn it quickly and clearly. So now you're going to do a final sweep. And this is where you're really getting down to the nitty-gritty of your proofreading. So you proofread when you've made all of the major changes to content. So if you're going to switch out one subtopic and stick in another, that's going to happen in one of the first sweeps. If you're going to reorganize, that's going to happen much earlier. And if you're fixing your paragraphs, again, that happens in an earlier sweep as you're revising. Be sure to build in enough time to do all of these sweeps. One of the things that we find is that students get really crunched and they're revising at the last minute. And they're finding errors or things that don't quite work. And because they're anxious and stressed, it's hard for them to find easy solutions. So make sure that you're building in the time so that this is a less stressful process and that those fixes come more easily to you. Try to print out, if you can, your best draft and read it aloud, either alone or with a peer. Or I would say, and this is my most recent technique that I use myself, read aloud your best draft and audio record yourself on your cell phone. Then when you listen, not only as you're reading it aloud, but you'll then listen as you play your audio recording, you can spot some of those problem places much more easily. I also, when I'm reading out loud, I notice the places where I'm starting to get out of breath. And there I start to look at, do I have a sentence that really works? Or is that sentence just way too long for my reader? Can I break it up into more readable chunks? Double check your citation style. I don't do this until one of my last proofreading sessions, because really it's one of the last things that I'll do aside from checking and fixing my thesis statement. So if you're using MLA, make sure that you've been consistent. If you're using APA, make sure that you've been consistent. Whatever the formatting is, I always like to have a sample, which you can find many of these online. I always go to Purdue's online writing lab and pull up one of their sample papers, and I pull up their APA or MLA formatting so that I have that in front of me, and then I can follow their model. So make any other formatting changes that you need to according to what your instructor has requested in the assignment guidelines. Sometimes these are easy areas to lose small marks, and that's kind of pointless. So give yourself time to do this well. And finally, reread the assignment instructions. Make sure that there's nothing that you've omitted. Sometimes an instructor might say, make sure you have a creative title or an original title. So if you just put term paper and then the name of the course, you'll want to change that for sure so that you don't lose marks. If you're not sure how to spot errors in punctuation, grammar, or spelling, check out our editing and proofreading resources online. You can find those in our online digital library, or come for a consultation to learn more about how to proofread your work. And we can offer you some skills that are specific to your writing style. So how do you find more help? And, and where do you find it? So the library can offer personal assistance with finding sources. We can help you narrow your search, use correct citation style. We can help you appropriately integrate sources into your paper. And we can offer you advice, especially if you're concerned about plagiarism or patch writing, or whether you've cited enough. We also have a lot of handouts and tip sheets, one-on-one writing consultations at any stage of your writing process. Even if you just got your assignment, sometimes sitting down with another person and just talking through the assignment and what your options are can help you narrow down your ideas. Remember that you can also meet with a librarian or chat with them online to get some help as to where to find the best kinds of sources and the kinds of sources that your instructor wants you to be using. So if you have any lingering questions, please come visit us at the Student Learning Commons. Come in for a writing consultation in person or virtually. We're happy to help you. Take care and happy writing.